I pushed open the door to my bedroom and froze. Two men in paint-splattered overalls were covering my peach-colored walls with thick brushes. My floral curtains lay in a heap on the floor. My dresser had been moved to the middle of the room, with cans of dripping paint sitting on top of the lacquered wood I'd restored myself. Manny, my 35-year-old son, leaned against the doorframe with his arms crossed, grinning as if he'd just told the funniest joke in the world. Beside him, Lauren, my daughter-in-law, was scrolling on her phone with that smug expression she got when she won. The brush in the air froze when they saw me. The younger painter looked at me with an uncomfortable expression, as if I'd interrupted something private. The smell of fresh paint made me dizzy, mixing with the rage that was starting to boil in my chest. What is the meaning of this? My voice came out weaker than I wanted. I had just gotten home after working a 12-hour shift in the kitchen of the Cookery, a place I'd spent 15 years preparing meals for families celebrating birthdays while I scalded my fingers on boiling oil. My feet ached in my worn shoes. My back protested from the hours bent over the stoves, but none of that mattered now. Lauren looked up from her phone and gave me that fake sweet smile she used when she wanted something. "Oh, Mama, you're home early. We're just making a few changes before we move in." Her voice was casual, as if she was commenting on the weather. Manny straightened up and walked toward me with that confidence that had always intimidated me. "Mom, we wanted to surprise you. You know this room is too big for just you, and we need more space. The kids are growing, and our apartment is just too small." My legs started to tremble. 20 years working in that hellish kitchen to save every single dollar that would let me buy this house. 20 years breathing grill smoke, enduring rants from cranky customers, scrubbing grease until late hours, all to have a place that was mine, where I could rest without having to ask anyone for permission. The older painter coughed uncomfortably. "Ma'am, if there's a problem, we can stop and come back tomorrow." No, keep going." Lauren waved her hand as if she owned the place. "We've already paid. Might as well finish today." Paid. With what money? I asked myself, but I already knew the answer. The money I had lent them last month when Manny lost his job at the factory. The money I had taken from my savings because my daughter-in-law begged me through tears to help them with the rent. Manny came closer and put his hand on my shoulder with a familiarity that no longer comforted me. "Mom, don't get like this. It's just paint. Plus, we've already talked to an architect. We can divide the house into 2 parts. You'll have your space, and we'll have ours, like one big, happy family." One big, happy family. The words sounded hollow, like an echo in an empty room. I looked at my wrinkled curtains on the floor, the ones I had sewn myself with fabric I bought at the market after 3 weeks of saving my tips. I looked at the growing paint stain on my dresser, the one I had found at a garage sale and sanded and varnished for 2 whole weekends. "And who decided this?" I asked, my voice starting to get some strength back. "When did you sit down and plan the future of my house without consulting me?" Lauren sighed dramatically and put away her phone. "Mama, don't be so dramatic. You always get so difficult when we try to do something nice. Look at this ugly color you had. The white is going to look beautiful. You'll see." "Beautiful for who?" I wanted to scream. I had chosen that peach color after days of comparing samples at the paint store. It reminded me of the sunsets I used to watch from the window of my old rented room when I dreamed of having my own walls that I could paint any color I wanted. The painters kept working, pretending not to hear our argument, but I felt their uncomfortable glances every time we raised our voices. The younger one had paint splotches even in his hair, and I wondered how much they were being paid for this last-minute job. Manny walked around the room like an inspector checking his property. "Mom, look, it's going to be so much brighter, and when we bring our furniture in, you'll see what a huge difference it makes." Lauren already found a beautiful bedroom set on sale. Their furniture, in my room, in the space I had filled with my own things, each with its own story, each bought with the sweat of my hands wrinkled by the detergents from the commercial kitchen. Lauren went over to the vanity where I kept my cheap perfumes and my creams for dry hands. "Oh, and all this mess we can organize better. "You don't need so many things, Mama. When you get older, you have to start simplifying your life." Simplify my life, as if my little treasures were trash cluttering up their plans, as if my 67 years had turned me into an annoying tenant in my own house. I felt something break inside me. It wasn't just the fresh paint covering my beloved walls, or the furniture moved without my permission. It was the way they had decided my future so naturally, as if I were an old piece of furniture that had to be put in the least visible corner. And just like that, everything started to crumble. But let me tell you how I got here, so you understand why that afternoon, watching those strangers paint my sanctuary, I knew it was time to defend myself, even if it meant losing the only family I had left. My name is Fatima Jones, and I am 67 years old. For the last 15 years, I have worked in the kitchen of the Cookery, a place where families go to celebrate birthdays, anniversaries, and graduations, while I sweat behind the stoves preparing their favorite dishes. I get there at 5 in the morning to prepare the chicken stock that simmers for hours, and I leave at 7 at night with my uniform soaked in grease and my hair smelling of fried onions. Before the Cookery, I worked in 3 other restaurants. Always in the kitchen, always invisible to the customers who enjoyed my food without knowing who prepared it. My hands are marked with small scars from hot pans and knives that slipped when I was rushing during peak hours. My nails, which I once kept painted pink, I now keep short and unpolished because it's more sanitary for handling food. I was widowed 12 years ago. Robert died of a heart attack while watching television on a Sunday afternoon. A good man who worked his whole life in a furniture factory and left me with more beautiful memories than money in the bank. After his funeral, I stayed in the apartment we had been renting since we got married, paying $550 a month to a landlord who raised the rent every year without improving a single thing. Manny was different when he was a boy, a shy kid who would hug me when I got home from work tired and help me fold the laundry while he told me about his day at school. But something changed when he met Lauren. She came into his life like a hurricane, full of big plans and expensive dreams. She talked about trips to Europe, new cars, and houses in fancy neighborhoods where important people lived. At first, I thought it was good that my son had an ambitious woman beside him. Robert had always been content, happy with little, and I was afraid Manny had inherited that same tranquility that was sometimes confused with a lack of ambition. But I soon discovered that Lauren's dreams came with a price that others had to pay. When they got married, I lent them $1,000 for the party. Money I had saved penny by penny, keeping it in a cookie tin because I didn't trust banks. They promised to pay me back in 6 months. That was 8 years ago. When their first child was born, they asked me for another $800 for hospital expenses. When the second one came, they needed $100 to buy a used crib and stroller. There was always an emergency, always a promise to pay me back soon. I never asked them for the money. A mother doesn't charge her son interest, I would tell myself. But deep down, I knew my generosity had become their convenience. It was easier to ask Mom than to find extra jobs or live with fewer luxuries. Working in a restaurant teaches you to be strong. When the chef yells at you because a dish took 2 extra minutes, when the servers blame you because a customer complained about the temperature of the soup, when your swollen feet are begging for a break, but you have 5 hours left in your shift, you learn that no one is going to defend you if you don't defend yourself first. You also learn the value of money. Every dollar they paid me represented half an hour of standing in front of a hot grill or washing huge pots with water so hot it made my hands red up to my elbows. That's why I saved everything I could. A few dollars from weekend tips when I worked overtime on holidays, $50 when the restaurant had a special event, and we got bonuses. I lived on the bare minimum: secondhand clothes, simple food I cooked at home, entertainment limited to free television shows. On Sundays, my only day off, I would walk around the flea market looking for useful and cheap things. That's where I found my dresser for $30, the one that now had white paint stains on top of it. After Robert's death, loneliness became my constant companion. I would get home from work tired, and there was no one waiting for me with a hot cup of tea or asking me how my day was. Weekends felt endless. Manny would visit every now and then, always with Lauren and the kids, But their visits felt more like inspections. They would check my refrigerator, comment on how small the apartment was, suggest that it was time for me to think about moving into a senior living community. A senior living community, as if being 67 years old had automatically turned me into someone incapable of making my own decisions. As if working 40 hours a week in a commercial kitchen was something a frail or senile person would do. Lauren had a special way of making me feel old and out of date. She would talk about phone apps I didn't understand, trendy places she had eaten, important people she had met at Manny's job. She always ended her stories with a condescending smile and a pat on my hand. "Oh, Mama, what would you know about these modern things?" But I knew things she didn't know. I knew how to make a $1,200 a month paycheck last for 30 whole days. I knew how to get tough stains out of clothes and how to repair broken appliances with patience and ingenuity. I knew how to work 12 hours straight without complaining and how to save money even when it seemed impossible. For years, my dream had been to own my own home. Not something big or luxurious, just a place where I could paint the walls any color I wanted, where I could plant flowers in the garden, where I could invite my friends from work over for coffee without asking a landlord for permission. A place that was completely mine, where no one could tell me they were raising the rent or that I had to move out. That dream became more urgent after the new owner of my building decided to renovate all the apartments. We had 3 months to vacate or accept a rent increase of $200 a month. For me, that $200 represented the difference between living with dignity and counting every penny to make it to the end of the month. It was then that I made the decision that would change everything. For 30 years, I had been secretly saving money. Not just the money Manny and Lauren knew I had, but other money. Money I had saved coin by coin, bill by bill, hidden in places no one else knew about. Under the mattress was a plastic bag with $1 bills. Inside, an empty coffee can at the bottom of the closet, I kept all the extra weekend tips. In the hem of my Sunday best dress, the one I wore for special occasions, I had sewn $500 in $50 bills. When I counted it all, I had $3,800, a fortune for someone who earned $200 a week. Money that represented years of not buying myself new shoes, of cooking at home instead of ordering out, of walking instead of taking the bus when the weather allowed. Every bill had a story of sacrifice behind it. The day I decided to look for a house was a Tuesday morning. I had woken up with a strange determination, as if something inside me had awakened after years of being asleep. I got dressed in my best clothes, counted my money one more time, and went out to tour neighborhoods where houses were within my budget. The first house I saw was in a quiet neighborhood, 40 minutes by bus from the restaurant. It was small with 2 bedrooms, 1 bathroom, a tiny kitchen, and a backyard the size of a dining room table. The exterior paint was peeling, the windows needed repair, and the front yard was more weeds than grass, but it had something that made me fall in love with it immediately. A big window in the master bedroom faced east, perfect for watching the sunrise. The real estate agent, a young man in a fancy suit with a salesman's smile, looked me up and down when I said I was interested. "Ma'am, this property costs $35,000. Are you pre-approved for a mortgage?" "I don't need a loan," I replied. "I can pay in cash." His expression changed completely. Suddenly, I was no longer an old woman wasting his time, but a serious client. He showed me every corner of the house, explaining the advantages of each room as if it were a palace. "The kitchen has enough space for a small table. The bathroom was renovated 5 years ago. The electrical system is in good condition." But I had already made up my mind from the moment I saw that window. For years, I had woken up in dark rooms, in apartments where sunlight was filtered by taller buildings. Here, I could have my morning coffee watching the day be born. I could have plants on the windowsill. I could feel alive instead of just functional. That same afternoon, I made an offer of $30,000. The seller accepted immediately. According to the agent, they had been trying to sell the house for 8 months without success. The neighborhood wasn't fancy enough for buyers with more money, but it also wasn't cheap enough for buyers with no savings. It was perfect for someone like me. The legal paperwork took 3 weeks. 3 weeks during which I didn't tell anyone, not Manny, not Lauren, not even Joanna, my coworker, who was the closest thing to a friend I had. Every night after getting home from the restaurant, I would sit and imagine what it would be like to live in my own house, what color I would paint the walls, where I would put my few pieces of furniture, how I would organize the kitchen so it would be perfect for cooking just for me. The day I signed the final papers, my hands were shaking, not from nerves, but from excitement. At 65 years old, for the first time in my life, I was going to have something that was completely mine, something no one could take away, where no one could raise the rent or tell me what I could or couldn't do. When I received the keys, I stood in front of the door for several minutes before opening it. Once I stepped inside, I would no longer be the same Fatima who had lived her whole life adapting to others' spaces. I would be Fatima the homeowner, Fatima the house owner, Fatima who had achieved something that many people with better jobs and more education hadn't managed to do. The house was empty and smelled of dampness, but it was mine. I walked through each room slowly, touching the walls, testing the light switches, opening and closing the windows. In the master bedroom, I stood in front of that window I had liked so much and smiled for the first time in months. That night, I slept on the floor of my new house, wrapped in a blanket I had brought from the rented apartment. I didn't have any furniture yet, but I had something better. I had the certainty that every inch of that place belonged to me. The problem started when I decided to tell Manny and Lauren. I invited them to dinner the following Sunday. I cooked their favorite dish, chicken mole, which took me 3 hours to prepare, and set the table with my nicest plates. I wanted it to be a celebration, a special occasion where I would share my achievement with the only people I considered family. Manny arrived in a bad mood. He had lost his job at the factory the week before for being late repeatedly, and he was frustrated because his job interviews weren't going well. Lauren arrived complaining about the traffic, the heat, and how the kids had been unbearable all week. I waited until after dessert to give them the news. "I have something important to tell you," I said, trying to sound casual, but excited. Lauren sighed. "Oh, Mama, I hope you're not about to get sentimental. We have enough problems of our own." "No, it's not that. It's something good. I bought a house." The silence that followed was so thick you could cut it. Manny paused his fork halfway to his mouth. Lauren looked at me as if I had announced I was going to marry an extraterrestrial. "You bought a house?" Manny asked finally. "A small house in the neighborhood of St. Vincent. 2 bedrooms, a yard. It's perfect for me." Lauren straightened up in her chair. "With what money? Where did you get $30,000? "I had been saving for years," I explained. "Money from my job, tips, small amounts that I had been putting away." Lauren's expression changed from surprise to something I couldn't immediately identify. It was a mix of anger and disappointment, as if my independence were a personal betrayal to her. "Mom, why didn't you tell us anything?" Manny asked. "We could have helped you find something better, a place more in the city, safer." I didn't need help. I already found what I wanted. Lauren got up from the table abruptly. "This is unbelievable. We're over here struggling to pay rent, borrowing money for the kids' expenses, and you had thousands of dollars hidden away this whole time?" "They weren't hidden. They were saved." "It's the same thing!" Lauren yelled. "Do you know how many times we've needed money? How many times we've had to borrow pennies from you when you had a fortune stashed away?" Manny tried to calm her down, but I could see in his eyes that he thought the same thing. For them, my money had always been a resource available for their emergencies. The idea that I had my own goals, my own dreams, hadn't crossed their minds. "Besides," Lauren continued, "you're not so young anymore to live alone. What's going to happen if you get sick? If you fall and there's no one to help you?" "I'm perfectly fine," I replied. "I work 8 hours a day. I handle my own affairs. I don't need supervision." But Lauren had already found her argument. The seed she would plant that night would grow to become the justification for everything that would happen later. "Mama, at this age, you have to be practical. It would be much smarter if you sold that house and came to live with us. We could use the money to buy a bigger house where we all fit comfortably." There it was. Not 10 minutes had passed since they learned of my accomplishment, and they were already planning how to take advantage of it. Moving into my new house took 3 full weekends. Since I didn't have money to hire a moving company, I had to transport my belongings little by little on the public bus. Each trip I would carry 2 large bags full of clothes, books, and the small treasures I had accumulated over the years. The bus drivers knew me by then, and some of them would even help me lift the heavier bags. The hardest part was moving my small refrigerator and my washing machine. For that, I had to ask for help from Joe, Joanna's brother, who had an old but functional pickup truck. I paid him $50 for the favor, money he needed more than I did, but it represented my independence. Seeing my appliances in my own kitchen was worth every penny. My first few months in the house were the happiest I remembered living. I woke up every morning with the sun coming in through my favorite window, and before I got up, I would stay for a few minutes enjoying the silence that was completely mine. There were no neighbors arguing on the other side of thin walls, no heavy footsteps on the floor above, no loud music at midnight. After work, instead of arriving at an apartment that smelled like other tenants' food, I would arrive at a house that smelled like the scented candles I would buy myself every now and then as a personal gift. I had planted flowers in the front yard, purple petunias and white daisies that I bought on sale at the local nursery. I didn't know much about gardening, but I learned by watching videos at the public library on Sundays. The kitchen was my favorite place. It was small, but perfectly organized according to my needs. Every pot had its place. Every knife was exactly where I needed it. After years of working in chaotic commercial kitchens, having an orderly and quiet space to prepare my own food was an indescribable luxury. On weekends, I dedicated myself to improving the house with the money I had left over from my paycheck. I bought paint on sale and painted the living room a soft yellow that reminded me of my grandmother's kitchen. I painted the bathroom a mint green I had seen in a magazine someone had forgotten at the restaurant. Each can of paint cost $12, but it completely transformed the atmosphere of each room. I learned to fix things by watching internet tutorials at the library. When the faucet in the sink broke, instead of calling a plumber who would have charged me $100, I bought the necessary parts for $15 and fixed it myself. When one of the windows wouldn't close properly, I sanded down the swollen wood and adjusted it until it worked perfectly. Manny and Lauren came to visit me twice during the first few months. Both times, they arrived with a critical attitude that dampened my joy. The first visit was 3 weeks after I moved in. They showed up without warning on a Saturday afternoon when I was in the yard planting some red geraniums. "Mom, this neighborhood looks kind of rough," was the first thing Manny said when he got out of the car. "There are houses with broken fences, and some of the yards are full of weeds." Lauren walked through the house with a look of disgust, touching the freshly painted walls as if they were made of cardboard. "This kitchen is way too small. Where are you going to put your stuff when you have guests? And this bathroom needs a complete renovation. The tile looks so old." I liked my bathroom. The tile was from the 70s, but it was in perfect condition, and I had cleaned it until it shined. The towels I had bought on sale matched the green of the walls perfectly. The second visit was worse. They arrived during a heavy rain and found a small leak in the ceiling of the guest bedroom. Instead of offering to help me fix it, Lauren took the opportunity to make a list of everything that was wrong with the house. "Look at this, Mama. This house is falling apart. See this moisture stain? That's going to get worse until all the wood rots, and these old windows don't insulate at all. Your electricity bills are going to be so expensive in the winter." Manny joined in with his criticism, with an exaggerated concern for my safety. "Mom, this neighborhood isn't safe for an older woman living alone. The house on the corner has broken windows, and there are abandoned cars on some of the streets. What are you going to do if there are burglars?" "Those are the same worries I would have anywhere," I replied. "And here, at least, I own my space." But their words planted a seed of doubt that grew every time I heard a strange noise at night, every time I saw a neighbor who had left trash in their yard, every time I had to repair something else in the house. The maintenance expenses were constant but manageable. $20 to change a pipe that started to drip, $5 to buy materials and fix the leak in the roof myself, $40 to hire an electrician to check an outlet that had started sparking. Every expense hurt, not because I didn't have the money, but because it reduced my savings that had cost me so much to accumulate. But for every dollar I spent on repairs, I saved more by not paying rent. My monthly expenses had dropped from $850, rent plus utilities in the apartment, to $450, just utilities and maintenance. That $400 extra every month gave me a feeling of security I had never experienced. With that extra money, I was able to buy things I had considered unreachable luxuries for years. A new television to replace the one I had inherited from Robert, which already had a scratched screen, a set of good quality sheets that wouldn't fray after 3 washes, a small coffee maker that let me have freshly brewed coffee every morning instead of instant. I also started inviting Joanna over for lunch on Sundays. She was a widow too. She lived in a small apartment with her older sister, and she valued having a quiet place to talk without interruptions. We would cook together, talk about our jobs, our aches and pains, the television shows we liked. It was the first time in years that I had a real friendship, not just work camaraderie. Joanna helped me understand that what Manny and Lauren were doing had a name: financial abuse. "Oh, Fatima," she told me one Sunday while we were drying dishes, "your kids see you as a piggy bank with legs. Every time they need money, they know they can just smash the glass and take whatever they need." Her words hurt because I recognized the truth in them. For years, I had justified their constant requests for money as legitimate needs. The kids needed clothes, the car had broken down, they had had unexpected medical expenses. But now that I had physical distance from them, I could see the pattern more clearly. They never paid back the money I lent them. They never invited me out to eat, to reciprocate all the times I had paid when we went out together. They never gave me gifts for my birthday or on Mother's Day, but they did expect me to be generous on their birthdays and at Christmas. But I also started to notice something more worrying. The visits had become more frequent, and each time they came with more criticism of my house and my decision to live independently. Lauren had started making comments about my age and my ability to take care of myself alone. "Mama, yesterday my friend Rose told me that her mom fell at her house and was on the floor for 3 hours before anyone found her. What would you do if something like that happened to you?" Rose was Lauren's neighbor who was 85 years old and had balance problems. I was 67 years old and worked 8 hours a day on my feet in a commercial kitchen. The comparison was ridiculous, but Lauren repeated it every time she came to visit. Manny had started making more direct suggestions about selling the house. "Mom, I've been thinking, if you sold this house right now, you could easily get $40,000. Prices have gone up since you bought it. With that money, we could buy a bigger house where we could all live comfortably." We could all live comfortably, as if my comfort was a secondary factor in the equation. But the real pressure started when Manny lost his second job in 6 months. After 8 months of living in my house, I decided to have a small celebration to show my friends and family what I had accomplished. It wasn't a big party, just a Sunday lunch for the most important people in my life. I invited Joanna and her sister Lillian, Vincent the electrician who had helped me with repairs and had become a good friend, Manny and Lauren with the kids, and Tatiana, my cousin, who lived on the other side of town and hadn't seen my house yet. I spent 2 weeks preparing everything. I cleaned the house until every surface shined. I planted new flowers in the front yard and even had a small crack in the exterior wall that had been bothering me since I moved in repaired. I wanted everything to look perfect. The menu was planned with the same care I put into special banquets at the restaurant. Red mole with chicken that I started preparing the previous Saturday, rice and beans that I cooked over low heat for hours, handmade tortillas that I kneaded that same morning, and for dessert, tres leches cake, which was my specialty. I spent $10 on ingredients, more than I spent on food during 2 normal weeks, but it was worth it for this special occasion. I set the table with white tablecloths I had bought on sale, plates that matched even though they weren't from the same set, and fresh flowers from the garden in a vase I had found at a garage sale. It wasn't elegant like the tables Lauren photographed at the expensive restaurants she sometimes went to with her friends, but it had something those tables would never have. It was completely mine. Joanna and Lillian arrived first, carrying a tray of empanadas they had made as a contribution. Vincent arrived with a bottle of cheap but decent wine and a small bag that contained some pots of aromatic herbs for my garden. Tatiana arrived half an hour late, but with a huge smile and a hug that lasted several seconds. "Oh, cousin, this house is beautiful," Tatiana exclaimed as she walked from room to room admiring every detail. "I can't believe it's yours. Do you remember when we were kids and we played house under Grandma's table? You said that when you grew up you were going to have a house with a garden full of flowers." Yes, I remembered. It had been my dream since I was 8 years old, when I helped my grandmother water her plants, and she promised me that one day I would have my own garden. Almost 60 years had passed, but I had finally done it. The food was perfect. The mole had the exact balance of spicy and sweet that had taken me years to perfect. The rice was fluffy and flavorful. The tortillas were hot and soft. My guests ate with the appetite of people who appreciated good home cooking, not as a social obligation, but as true pleasure. Vincent complimented my seasoning. "Fatima, this mole is better than my mom's, and that's saying a lot. I don't know how you do it, but every time I taste your food, I remember why I decided to become an electrician instead of a cook." Joanna raised her glass of soda to make a toast. "To Fatima, who shows us that it's never too late to fulfill our dreams, who teaches us that a strong woman can achieve anything she sets her mind to." Everyone toasted and applauded. I felt so proud that my eyes filled with tears. It was the first time in my life that anyone had given public recognition to my achievements. At the restaurant, when I prepared banquets for 200 people, the chef got all the praise. In my marriage, Robert was a good man, but he wasn't one to express admiration with words. This moment of celebration was completely new to me. Manny and Lauren arrived an hour late when we had already finished the main course and were serving the dessert. They came in with a quick apology about the traffic and sat in the chairs I had saved for them, but their cold attitude contrasted with the warm atmosphere we had created. Lauren greeted everyone with forced smiles and superficial comments about how pretty the table looked, but I knew her well enough to notice the critical glances she was giving every detail. The way she touched the tablecloths as if evaluating their quality, how she checked the plates as if looking for flaws, how she looked at the vase with flowers from the garden with an expression that suggested she found them common. Manny ate in silence, responding with monosyllables when someone asked him questions about his job or the kids. The kids, who had arrived restless after the car ride, ran around the house touching everything without their parents setting any limits. Tatiana, who didn't know Manny and Lauren well, tried to include them in the conversation. "You must be so proud of Fatima. Not everyone has the determination to save so much money and buy their own house at 65. Lauren smiled with that fake smile she used when she wanted to seem nice, but she was annoyed. "Yes, of course. Although we would have preferred she consulted us before making such an important decision. At this age, living alone can be dangerous." The comment fell like a stone in the middle of the celebration. Vincent, who knew very well my ability to take care of myself alone after seeing how I fix things in my house, frowned. "Excuse me, but Fatima is one of the most independent people I know. She works more hours than most people half her age." Lauren straightened up in her chair, interpreting Vincent's words as a challenge. "Well, you don't know the whole situation. We're the family. We know what's best for her." Joanna put her fork down on the plate, with more force than necessary. "And what's best for her according to you two?" "That she live in a place where she has support, where she's not alone if something happens. This house is way out here in a neighborhood that isn't the safest." Lillian, who was a straightforward woman and had no patience for diplomacy, intervened. "Excuse me, but Fatima seems perfectly capable of making her own decisions, and from what I can see, this house is in excellent condition." Manny finally spoke, but his words were worse than his silence. "The thing is, you guys don't understand the full situation. My mom spent all her savings on this house, money she could have used to secure her future. If she gets sick, if she needs special care, what is she going to pay with?" "I have health insurance," I replied, feeling my joy evaporating like water in a hot pan. "And I have a job. I'm not an invalid." But Lauren had already found her rhythm. "Mama, don't be offended, but you're not at an age to be lifting heavy pots and working on your feet for hours. One of these days you're going to get hurt. And then what are we going to do?" Vincent got up from the table, clearly uncomfortable with the direction the conversation had taken. "Fatima, thank you so much for the food and the hospitality. Everything was delicious, but I think it's time for me to go." Tatiana also got up, but before she left, she came close and whispered in my ear, "Cousin, don't let anyone take what you worked so hard to get. This house is yours, and your life is yours." Joanna and Lillian left soon after, but before they went out the door, Joanna squeezed my hand tightly. "If you need anything at all, you call me. You're not alone in this." When it was just Manny, Lauren, the kids, and me, the atmosphere became heavy, like a storm cloud. Lauren got up to wash the dishes without me asking her to, but she did it with rough movements that made her bad mood clear. "Mom, we need to talk," Manny said when the kids went out to the yard to play. I sat on my favorite couch, the one I had bought on a 3-month payment plan, and waited to hear what they had to say. Lauren dried her hands and sat down in front of me with her arms crossed. "Mama, let's be honest. This situation can't go on like this." "What situation?" "You living alone, spending money on a house that's too big for your needs, while we're struggling to make ends meet." There it was. The real reason for their annoyance wasn't my safety or my well-being. It was that I had something they wanted and couldn't have. Manny came closer and sat on the arm of my chair, using that physical proximity that he knew made me uncomfortable to pressure me. "Mom, we've been thinking, what if we sell this house and buy a bigger one where we can all live comfortably? You would have your own room, but you would have company, and we could help you with the expenses and maintenance." Sell, as if the house belonged to the three of us instead of just me. "I don't want to sell my house," I said in the firmest voice I could. Lauren sighed with exaggeration. "Mama, be practical. With what this house is worth plus what we can contribute, we could buy something much better in a nicer, safer neighborhood." "This house is perfect for me." "But not for us," Lauren murmured, so low I barely heard her. That night, after they left, I sat in my garden and thought about what had happened. My moment of celebration had been ruined by the greed of the two people who were supposed to love me most in the world. But I had also learned something valuable. I had true friends who respected my decisions and valued my independence. The war had just begun. 3 weeks after the lunch, Manny lost his job at the insurance company. It was the third job he had lost in 2 years, always for the same reason: tardiness, unjustified absences, and an attitude his bosses described as unprofessional. But according to him, all his bosses had been unfair. All his co-workers were envious of him, and the world was conspiring against him. The call came on a Tuesday night when I had just gotten home from the restaurant and was soaking my swollen feet in warm salt water. Manny sounded desperate on the phone, like a child who had broken something valuable and needed his mom to fix it. "Mom, I got fired from work today. My boss said it was because I was late 3 times this month, but it's not fair. The traffic is impossible, and besides, I'm having problems with the car." "What are you going to do now?" I asked, even though I already knew where the conversation was going. "I don't know, Mom. I have to pay rent next week, and I don't have anything. The kids need school supplies, and Lauren says that if we don't pay soon, they're going to kick us out of the apartment." I felt that familiar knot in my stomach, that mix of guilt and resentment I always got when Manny had money problems. As a mother, my instinct was to protect him, help him, solve his problems. But as a woman who had worked her whole life to get stability, it bothered me that at 35 years old, he still expected me to be his financial lifeline. "Manny, you need to find another job quickly. There are a lot of places that are hiring." "I know, Mom, but in the meantime, I need help. Can you lend me money for the rent? It's $800. I'll pay you back as soon as I find a job." $800. Almost 2 months of my house maintenance expenses. Money I had sweated for during a full week of work at the restaurant, waking up at 5 in the morning and getting home at 8 at night with burned hands and an aching back. "Manny, I've already lent you a lot of money this year. You need to learn to manage your expenses." "Mom, please, it's an emergency. Do you want my kids to be left on the street?" The emotional manipulation that always worked, the grandmother guilt that couldn't stand the idea of her grandchildren suffering for their parents' mistakes. But this time, sitting in my own house, surrounded by things I had bought with my own effort, something inside me rebelled. Your children are not going to be left on the street. You are going to find a way to solve your problem like the adult you are. The silence on the other end of the line lasted for several seconds. When Manny spoke again, his voice had a tone I had never heard before, cold and calculating. "Okay, Mom, I get it. I see what your priorities are now." "What do you mean by that?" "That ever since you bought that house, you've become selfish. Before, you always helped us when we needed it, but now that you have your little palace, you've forgotten you have family." The words hurt like a slap. Selfish for wanting to keep the money I had earned with my work. Selfish for having fulfilled a dream that had taken me decades to achieve. Selfish for not wanting to continue being the personal bank for my grown children. "I'm not selfish, Manny. I'm a woman who worked her whole life to have a little security in her old age. Mom, you're 67 years old. What do you need so much money for? What do you need such a big house for? It would be so much smarter for you to come live with us and sell that house. With that money, we could buy something better for everyone." There it was again, the same proposal they had been making since I bought the house, but now with more urgency because they needed money immediately. "I'm not going to sell my house, Manny." "But you're spending it all on silly things. Yesterday Lauren told me she saw you bought new plants for the garden. What good are plants when your son doesn't have a job?" What good were plants? As if beauty, joy, the pride of owning something weren't good for anything. As if the only purpose of my money was to solve the problems they created with their bad decisions. "My plants cost $10. Your rent costs $800. It's not the same." The conversation ended with Manny hanging up on me, something he had never done before. I was left with the phone in my hand, listening to the dial tone, feeling that something important had changed between us forever. 2 days later, they showed up at my house without warning. It was Friday afternoon. I had just gotten home from work and was changing my uniform when I heard a knock at the door. I thought it was Vincent, who sometimes came by to see if I needed help with anything, but when I opened it, I found Manny, Lauren, and the 2 kids standing on my porch. "Surprise," Lauren said, with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "We came to visit." They walked in without waiting for an invitation, the kids running straight to the backyard, Manny carrying a small bag, and Lauren with that owner-of-the-house attitude that made me nervous. "What's in that bag?" I asked. "Well, Mama, since you didn't want to help us with the money, the landlord gave us 3 days to vacate the apartment, so we decided to come stay with you while we look for something cheaper." My heart stopped. Stay with me in my house, in the refuge I had worked so hard to get. "No," I said immediately. "You can't stay here." Lauren sat on my couch as if she hadn't heard my refusal. "Why not? You have 2 bedrooms and we're family. It's the least you can do after refusing to help us." "Because this is my house, and I decide who lives here." Manny put the bag on the floor and looked at me with that look of exaggerated disappointment he had used to manipulate me since he was a teenager. "Mom, are you seriously going to leave us on the street? Your own grandchildren?" "I'm not leaving you on the street. You made decisions that led you to this situation. You can look for another apartment. You can ask Lauren's family for help. You can do 1,000 things before invading my space." Lauren got up from the couch with a dramatic flourish. "Invading your space? Listen to how she talks to her own family. We who have always taken care of her, who have always been there for her. When have you taken care of me? When have you been there for me? I'm the one who has always helped you." "Oh, Mama, don't exaggerate. Don't you remember when you were sick with the flu last year and Manny went to buy you medicine? One time, just one time, in 12 years of being a widow, Manny had gone to the pharmacy for me when I had a high fever, and I remembered it because it had been so exceptional that it surprised me. That's not enough to justify you taking over my house." Manny came up to me with that condescending smile I hated. "Mom, don't be dramatic. We're not taking over anything. We just need a place to stay for a few weeks while we find something permanent." A few weeks that would turn into months, and months into years. I knew it because I knew them. Once they were settled in my house, it would be impossible to get them out. They would start talking about dividing expenses, making modifications to accommodate the whole family, how convenient it was for everyone to live together. The answer is no. You can't stay here for a single night. Lauren changed her tactic from pleading to direct attack. Fine, Mama. We understand what you're really like. But don't forget that when you're old and you need someone to take care of you, you'll remember this moment. Are you threatening me? I'm not threatening you. I'm telling you the truth. Family is supposed to help each other, but you only think about yourself. Thinking about myself, as if it were a crime after 67 years of thinking about others first. First my parents, then Robert, then Manny, and now finally, me. They left that night, but not before Lauren made one last observation that chilled me to the bone. Mama, this house is too big for you alone, and the neighborhood isn't safe. One of these days, you're going to need someone to take care of you, and I hope we have the heart to do it after how you're treating us. That night, I couldn't sleep, not from guilt, but from fear. For the first time since I bought the house, I felt that my refuge was threatened. I knew Manny and Lauren well enough to know they wouldn't give up easily. If they couldn't get my money with tears, they would try with pressure. If they couldn't convince me with words, they would look for other ways. I got up several times to check that all the doors were locked. The war had officially begun. The first sign that something was wrong was the sound of keys in my lock on a Saturday morning. I was in the kitchen making coffee when I heard that familiar metallic jingle, followed by the familiar sound of my front door opening. But it was impossible. I had the only keys to my house. I came out of the kitchen with the coffee cup in my hand, expecting to find a neighbor with an emergency, or maybe Vincent who had come to check on something. Instead, I found Manny standing in my living room, smiling as if he had every right in the world to be there. Morning, Mom. I came early to talk to you. How did you get in? My voice came out higher than normal. Oh, that. Lauren had a copy of your keys, made the last time we visited. She said it was for safety, in case something happened to you and we needed to get in. I stood there frozen, the coffee cup trembling in my hands. They had violated my privacy in the most basic way possible. They had taken my keys and my permission. They had made a copy without consulting me, and now they were entering my house as if it were theirs. Give me those keys back immediately. Manny sat on my couch, crossed his arms, and looked at me with that expression of exaggerated patience he used when he thought I was being irrational. Mom, don't get worked up. The keys are for your own safety. What would happen if you fell and couldn't get to the door? If you had a medical emergency? I don't need anyone else to have keys to my house. This is my private property. Well, that's what I wanted to talk to you about. Lauren and I have been thinking, and we believe it's time we made some changes here. What kind of changes? Manny got up and started walking around the living room as if he were inspecting a property he planned to buy. This house has a lot of potential, but it needs to be modernized. The guest bedroom could become a room for the kids. The living room is big enough to be divided to make a game area. And your bedroom, well, it's too big for one person. My bedroom, the sanctuary I had created with so much care, with my floral curtains, my peach-colored walls, my perfect window for watching the sunrise. You are not touching my bedroom. Mom, be reasonable. There are 4 of us and 1 of you. It's logical that the space should be distributed according to each family's needs. Each family, as if he and I were separate families with equal rights to my property. This conversation is over, Manny. I want you to leave my house right now. Instead of getting up, he leaned back more comfortably on the couch. Mom, I'm not leaving. Lauren and the kids are coming in an hour with some of our stuff. We've already decided that we're going to live here while we look for something bigger and more suitable for everyone. I'm calling the police. Manny laughed, but it wasn't a happy laugh. It was the laugh of someone who knew something I didn't. And what are you going to tell them? That your son came to visit you at your house? I have keys. I have a family relationship with you, and I'm not doing anything illegal. You came in without my permission. I have keys. That implies permission. I realized he had planned everything carefully. It wasn't an impulsive decision motivated by desperation. It was a calculated strategy to take over my house in a way that would be difficult to fight legally. When Lauren arrived with the kids and 3 large suitcases, I had already called the police. But Manny was right. There wasn't much they could do. The officer who came, a young man who seemed uncomfortable with the whole situation, explained that family property disputes were complicated. "Ma'am, I understand your frustration, but your son has keys to the house and says you gave them permission to stay. Unless you have some document that proves otherwise, this is considered a civil conflict, not a criminal one." Document. What document would I have? Who imagines they need a written contract to prevent their own family from invading their house? Lauren had settled into my kitchen and was preparing food as if she were the owner. The kids were running all over the house, touching my things, moving my furniture, treating my space as if it were a theme park. Manny had brought his big television into the living room and was connecting it without asking me if he could move my small television. That first night, I slept with my bedroom door locked, listening to strange noises in my own house. Low conversations in the living room, footsteps in the hallway, the sound of the television late into the night. My refuge had become a guest house where I was the only one who hadn't chosen to be there. On the second day, I came home from work to find they had moved all my living room furniture. My favorite couch was pushed into a corner against the window. My coffee table had been replaced by a bigger one they had brought, and my plants had been moved to the backyard to make more space. On the third day, Lauren had completely reorganized my kitchen. My pots were stored in cabinets I couldn't reach without climbing on a chair. My spices had been replaced by more expensive brands she preferred. My coffee maker had disappeared, replaced by a complicated espresso machine I didn't know how to use. On the fourth day, I found painters in my bedroom. When I got there and saw those men covering my peach-colored walls with white paint, something inside me broke for good. It wasn't just the paint, it was the sheer arrogance of thinking they could change my most intimate space without even consulting me. Manny explained the situation as if he were doing something perfectly reasonable. "Mom, we decided this room is too big for you. The kids need more space, and besides, this is going to be the master bedroom of the house. You can use the small bedroom, which is more appropriate for your needs anyway." The small bedroom was what they had called the guest room. It didn't have the big window I liked so much. It didn't have the spacious closet where I kept my clothes. It didn't have the connection to the main bathroom that made my mornings easier when I was rushing to get to work. Lauren came in with a triumphant smile. "Mama, you're going to see what a beautiful change this is. This white is going to make the room look bigger and more modern. And we've already ordered new furniture. A whole bedroom set that's going to look amazing." "With what money did you buy furniture?" Manny exchanged a glance with Lauren before answering. "Well, since we all live here now, we thought it was logical to use part of your savings for improvements that benefit the whole family." My savings. They had found my money. Somehow, during those 4 days, they had discovered where I kept my emergency reserves and had decided it was family money. "How much did you take?" "Just $2,000 for the bedroom furniture and some improvements for the house. Don't worry, it's an investment. When we sell the house, it's going to be worth much more." When we sell the house. It was no longer if they would sell the house, but when. That night, after the humiliation of finding painters in my bedroom, after discovering they had stolen my money, after seeing how they had turned my home into their personal project, I made a decision. I wasn't going to let this continue. I sat in what they had designated as my new room and took out my phone. First, I called Vincent to ask him for the name of the lawyer he had used when he bought his house. Then I called the bank to report unauthorized access to my accounts. Finally, I looked in the directory for the number of a locksmith who worked 24-hour emergency service. If they wanted a war, they were going to get one. But they didn't know who they were messing with. A woman who had worked for decades in kitchens where men thought they could intimidate her, where shouting bosses thought they could trample her, where every day was a battle to maintain dignity and respect. A woman who had learned that sometimes you have to fight for what is yours, no matter if the enemy is your own flesh and blood. The white paint was dripping onto my lacquered dresser, but it no longer hurt me to see it. It was evidence, proof of how far they were willing to go to steal what had cost me so much to get. Tomorrow, I was going to show them they had gravely underestimated Fatima Jones. That night, I waited until the whole house was silent. I listened as Manny and Lauren stopped whispering in what they now considered their bedroom. I waited for the children to fall asleep in the living room where they had put inflatable mattresses. When all that could be heard was the ticking of the kitchen clock, I came out of my small bedroom with my shoes in my hand. For the last 4 nights, I had been observing and documenting everything. Every change they made without my permission, everything they moved, every decision they made as if they were the owners. I had taken photos with my old phone, photos that showed my belongings pushed into a corner, my plants thrown into the yard, the fresh paint covering my beloved walls. I left the house through the back door, the one that led to the garden where I had planted my flowers with so much love. The locksmith had told me he would arrive at 5 in the morning, an hour before I had to leave for work. Everything had to be ready before Manny and Lauren woke up. At 5 o'clock sharp, an older man in a small truck arrived without making a sound. Vincent had recommended his brother-in-law Mark, someone trustworthy who understood delicate situations. I explained the situation to him while he examined my locks. "Ma'am Fatima, this is more common than you can imagine. Families that take advantage of older people thinking they won't defend themselves. But you are doing the right thing." Mark worked quickly and silently. He changed the front door lock, the lock on the garden gate, and even put a new latch on the back door. He gave me 3 sets of new keys, one for me, one spare to hide in a safety deposit box that Vincent would keep, and one more that I would keep in my work bag. When Mark left, I went to work as if it were a normal day. But during my whole shift at the restaurant, my heart was beating so hard I thought everyone could hear it. I knew that in a few hours Manny and Lauren would discover they could no longer get into my house. The moment came at 2 in the afternoon. I was preparing vegetables for the dinner rush when my phone started to ring. "Manny." I let it ring until it stopped. It rang again immediately. This time, "Lauren." I didn't answer that either. The text messages started coming in one after another. "Mom, why did you change the locks?" "Mama, this is ridiculous. Open the door." "Mom, we have all our stuff inside. The kids need their toys. This is kidnapping. We're going to call the police." The chef noticed I was distracted and asked me if I felt okay. I told him I was having some family problems, but that I could keep working. I needed to maintain my normal routine, to show that I was still the same responsible, hardworking Fatima I had always been. At 3:30, a message came that made me smile for the first time in days. "The police said that since it's your house, you can change the locks whenever you want." Perfect. Everything was going according to my plan. When I got home that afternoon, I found the whole family sitting on my front porch. The kids were playing on electronic tablets. Manny was pacing back and forth talking on the phone, and Lauren was looking at me with a rage that could have set my garden on fire. "Mom, open that door immediately," Manny yelled as soon as he saw me. "No." "What do you mean no? Our stuff is in there." "Your stuff shouldn't be in there. I never gave you permission to move into my house." Lauren got up from the step where she was sitting, with her hands on her hips like an indignant queen. "Mama, this has gotten beyond ridiculous. We're family. You can't leave us on the street." "I'm not leaving you on the street. I'm kicking you out of my house." "What's the difference?" Manny came toward me with that intimidating attitude he had perfected over the years. "Mom, you're doing something very serious. We're talking about your grandchildren. Are you really going to leave them homeless?" "Your grandchildren have parents who should provide them with a home. I am not responsible for the bad decisions you two make." For the first time since I had known them, Manny and Lauren were speechless. For years they had used emotional blackmail to get what they wanted from me, but now they realized that tactic had lost its power. Vincent arrived in his truck at the perfect moment. I had spoken with him that morning and asked him to come for moral support, but also to be a witness to everything that happened. "Afternoon, Fatima. Everything okay here?" His presence immediately changed the dynamic. Manny and Lauren couldn't act like the owners of the situation when there was an external witness watching. Lauren tried to win Vincent's sympathy. "Oh, Mr. Vincent, I hope you can talk to my mother-in-law. She's been acting so weird since she bought this house. She kicked us out of the house without warning, and now she won't open the door for us." Vincent looked at me with a small smile. "Ma'am Fatima, did these young people have a rental agreement with you?" "No, I never gave them permission to live here." "Then I don't see the problem. This is your property, and you decide who lives here." Manny was getting more and more desperate. His plan to gradually take over my house was crumbling, and he didn't know how to regain control. "Mr. Vincent, you don't understand the situation. My mom is alone. At her age, she shouldn't live without family nearby. We just want to take care of her." Vincent, who had known independent older people his whole life, including his own mother, who lived alone until she was 85, didn't buy that story. "Young man, your mom seems perfectly capable of taking care of herself. She works more hours than a lot of people half her age." But at that moment, the surprise I had been waiting for all day arrived. A police car parked in front of my house, and the same young officer who had come a few days before when I first called got out. "Officer, thank you for coming," I said, walking toward him. "Mrs. Jones, we received a call about a domestic disturbance. What's going on here?" Before I could answer, Lauren ran toward the police officer as if he were her personal savior. "Officer, my mother-in-law kicked us out of the house without warning. We have young children, and all our stuff is inside." The officer looked at me with curiosity. "Ma'am, is it true that these people were living in your house?" "Yes, but without my permission. They made copies of my keys without consulting me. They moved in without my authorization, and they started making changes to my property without my consent." The officer took out his notebook and started writing. "Is there any rental agreement, any written agreement?" "There's no agreement because I never gave them permission to live here." Manny intervened in a desperate voice. "Officer, she's my mom. She can't just kick us out like this. It's inhumane." The officer, who had seen similar cases before, sighed with patience. "Sir, the fact that she is your mother doesn't give you automatic rights to her property. If she is the legal owner of the house and there is no rental agreement, she can decide who lives there." "But our stuff is inside," Lauren insisted. "Your stuff can be collected under supervision," I explained to the officer. "I have no problem with that. I just don't want them to come back to live here." The officer nodded. "That seems reasonable, Mrs. Jones. Would you be willing to let them in to collect their belongings, and I will supervise?" "Of course." And that's how, an hour later, I watched as they took all the things they had brought to take over my space out of my house. The new furniture they had bought with my money, the big television, the suitcases with clothes, the kids' toys. Everything came out the same door through which it had entered without my permission. When they were done, Lauren looked at me with a mixture of hatred and desperation. "Mama, you're going to regret this. When you're old and you're alone, you're going to remember how you treated us." "I'm already old, Lauren, and I prefer to be alone than in bad company." Manny made one last attempt at emotional manipulation. "Mom, are you really going to choose a house over your family?" "I'm not choosing a house over my family. I'm choosing my dignity over abuse." They left that night, but I knew this wasn't over. I knew Manny and Lauren well enough to know they would look for another way to get what they wanted. I was not mistaken. The revenge would come in the morning. The next morning dawned with the sound I had dreaded most. Loud knocking on my front door. It was 6:30. I was just getting dressed for work when I heard authoritarian voices on the other side of the door. "Police, open the door, please." My heart stopped. It wasn't the young officer who had come the day before. They were different voices, more serious, more official. I put on a robe over my restaurant uniform and opened the door with trembling hands. 2 officers showed me a search warrant. "Mrs. Jones, we have a search warrant. We have received complaints that you are illegally retaining belongings that do not belong to you." "What belongings?" The officers came in without waiting for more explanations. One of them was carrying a detailed list on a sheet of paper. According to the complaint, you have in your possession furniture, cash, and important documents that belong to Manny Jones and Lauren Smith. Behind the police came Manny and Lauren, both with poorly disguised expressions of triumph. Lauren was carrying a folder full of papers as if she had been preparing for this moment for weeks. "Officer, I explained to your colleague yesterday that they moved into my house without my permission. I don't have anything that belongs to them." Manny went up to the main officer with the convincing attitude of a victim. "Officer, my mom is confused. She asked us to come live with her because she felt lonely and was afraid to live alone. We brought our furniture, our clothes, and we even contributed money for improvements to the house." "That's a lie," I said immediately. Lauren opened her folder and pulled out several papers. "Officer, here I have receipts for the furniture we bought for this house. I also have text messages where my mother-in-law asks us to come live with her." My blood ran cold. Text messages I had never sent, receipts for furniture they had bought with my stolen money. They had fabricated false evidence to support their story. The officer examined the documents Lauren had given him. "Mrs. Jones, these messages appear to be from your phone number. In one of them, you literally say, 'Manny, come live with me. This house is too big for me alone.' I never sent those messages. I don't know how they faked them, but I never wrote that." Manny intervened in a sad, worried voice. "Officer, my mom has been acting very strange lately. She forgets things. She says she didn't do things she did. We're worried about her mental health." Mental health. There was the new strategy. If they couldn't get my house through financial means, they were going to try to have me declared mentally incompetent. "Officer, I work 40 hours a week in a restaurant. I manage my own finances, I pay my bills, I maintain my house. There's nothing wrong with my mental health." But Lauren already had her argument prepared. "Mama, the other day she forgot she had invited us to dinner, and last week she called Manny 3 times to ask him the same thing. Those are clear signs of early onset dementia." More lies. Every word that came out of her mouth was a calculated lie to make me seem like a confused old woman who couldn't make decisions for herself. The main officer looked at me with a mixture of sympathy and suspicion. "Mrs. Jones, do you have any document that proves this house belongs to you exclusively?" "Of course, it's in my bedroom." When I went to get the house papers, I heard Manny talking in a low voice with the officers. "She's been very paranoid lately. She says we want to rob her, that we're conspiring against her. It's typical of people with senile dementia." I returned with the deed to the house, my identification, and all the documents that proved the property was mine and mine alone. The officer reviewed them carefully. "These documents are in order. The house is registered in your name exclusively." But Lauren didn't give up. "Officer, that doesn't change the fact that she invited us to live here and that we contributed financially. We have rights as tenants, even if there isn't a written contract." At that moment, my phone rang. It was Vincent. I answered quickly and explained the situation in a few words. He told me he would be there in 5 minutes with the lawyer he had recommended. "Officer, my legal representative is on his way. We can wait until he gets here." The officer nodded, but Manny got nervous. "We don't need to wait for any lawyer. This is a simple family matter." When Vincent arrived with attorney Michael Jenkins, the whole dynamic changed. The lawyer was a man in his 50s, professionally dressed, who immediately asked to see all the documents Lauren had presented. "Officer, may I review this alleged evidence?" Attorney Jenkins examined the text messages with a magnifying glass he took from his briefcase. After several minutes, he looked up with a small smile. "These messages are forged. It can be clearly seen in the metadata. They were created using an app to generate fake conversations." The main officer frowned. "Are you sure?" "Completely sure." "Furthermore, officer, presenting false evidence to authorities is a federal crime. These people could face charges for obstruction of justice." Lauren immediately turned pale. I didn't know. Someone else must have—" "Don't finish that sentence," the lawyer warned her. "Anything you say can be used against you." Manny tried one last desperate tactic. "Officer, no matter what these papers say, my mom needs help. She can't live alone at her age. Attorney Jenkins addressed Manny directly in a firm voice. Young man, your mother is a competent adult who has the right to make her own decisions about where and how to live. The fact that you don't like those decisions doesn't give you the right to fabricate false evidence or invade her property. The Maine officer closed his notebook and addressed Manny and Lauren. Based on what I've seen here, you have no legal rights to this property. The text messages are forged, there is no valid rental agreement, and Mrs. Jones is clearly competent to make her own decisions. But officer, Lauren protested, ma'am, if you continue to harass Mrs. Jones or try to enter her property without permission, you will face charges for trespassing. Is that clear? Manny and Lauren left my house that morning defeated and humiliated. But before he left, Manny looked at me with a coldness I had never seen in his eyes. Mom, you won this battle, but you're all alone now. Completely alone. His words were designed to hurt me, to make me feel guilty for having chosen my dignity over their manipulation. But for the first time in my life, loneliness didn't scare me. I'm not alone, Manny. I have true friends, a job that satisfies me, and a house that is completely mine. I have my self-respect, which I almost lost trying to please you two. After they left, Attorney Jenkins helped me understand my legal options. I could press charges against them for the fake messages, for the money they had taken from my savings, and for invading my property. I decided not to, but I asked him to prepare a restraining order that would prevent them from coming near my house. That afternoon, when I got home from work, I found my house exactly as I had left it, in silence, at peace, completely mine. I sat in my garden with a cup of coffee, looking at the flowers I had planted with my own hands, breathing the air of my own space. For the first time in months, I wasn't afraid that someone would come in without permission. I didn't have to listen to criticism about my decisions. I didn't have to justify my expenses or my dreams. Joanna came to visit me that night. She sat with me in the garden and asked me how I felt. Free, I replied. For the first time in my life, I feel completely free. I learned something important in these months of battle. Sometimes choosing your own happiness means disappointing the people you love. Sometimes defending your dignity means cutting ties with family who sees you as a resource rather than a person. Sometimes chosen loneliness is better than toxic company. I still work at the restaurant. I still take care of my garden. I still live in my small but perfect house. Manny and Lauren have not contacted me again, and that's okay. Maybe someday, when they learn to respect me as the independent person I am, we can rebuild a relationship. But it will be on my terms, not theirs. In the meantime, I am 67 years old. I have my own home, true friends, and the peace that comes from knowing that no one can take away what I worked so hard to get. Sometimes silence is the most powerful justice of all. Did you like my story? And which city are you listening from? Let's meet in the comments. If you like the story, you can support me by sending a super thanks so I can keep bringing more stories like this. Thank you so much for your sweet support. I'm looking forward to your comments on the story. On the screen, you can see 2 new life stories that I highly recommend. There's so much more on my channel. Don't forget to subscribe. See you in the next life story with love and respect.